It's been exactly 1 week since I stood in this kitchen and started off this ramsons and chili fermented pickle. And all I've done in the interim is actually just poke it back down a little bit, let some of the gas come out of it every couple of days or so. So that process, which I'm not even sure is strictly necessary, it's just a case of getting down there, poking it down, and can you see there's some bubbles arising there? Basically just press down the pickle so that the fermentation gases can escape. I suppose the only sense in which that's really necessary is if too many gas bubbles get trapped down here, that increases the volume of everything in the jar and it could overflow. I've never had a serious overflow incident with this kind of pickling. I suspect the weight of everything in here probably drives the bubbles up anyway. But as you can see, I've got belt and braces here. I've got a bowl and a plate, just in case it does overflow. Right, anyway, this pickle smells like it might be ready. And what do I mean by smells like? Well, it smells kind of funky. It smells sour, and I can definitely smell a lot of garlic aroma. But also, this is going to sound weird. It smells a little bit like a gas leak, but not in a bad way, which I know is a weird thing to say, but there it is. That's what it smells. It's got that kind of pungency that if you leave the gas on and don't light it, same sort of pungent smell. I don't think it is exactly the same smell, but puts me in mind of that. So I think this pickle is probably safe to eat. I am going to test it though. So I've got some pH indicator here. I'm just going to tear off a little strip of that. And then we'll take a little bit of the liquid out of there, just a dab, and wet that there. So that's got a kind of orange colour. I'm not sure how well this is going to show on the camera, but let me get into some natural daylight and we'll try and match up that colour. Okay, so to me, standing here in this room, that is the closest match. Definitely it is more orange than that one. So it's there. It's possibly between those two. So I've got a pH of 4 at most here, possibly 3.8 or something like that, somewhere around that region. So this is definitely acidic enough that this is now preserved. It's safe to eat because that acidity will have killed all of the microorganisms in there that might harm me. So after just a week, this pickle is ready for consumption. So I think we'll try and make something that kind of celebrates the flavours in here. So it's going to be a fried rice dish of some sort. And I've got this cooking bacon. This is a kilo of cooking bacon. It's now about £2 for this. This was from, I think, Lidl. There's a great big chunk of uncut bacon in there. So I'm going to have a slice off of that and we can have some nice little cubes of bacon. The reason this bacon is cheap is it's kind of misshapes and ends of pieces and so on. Do you know what? That's too nice. I'm going to keep that and roast it, I think. I think I'll cut up this piece for lunch today. There's like a piece of gammon there. I think we'll have that tomorrow roasted. So first thing's going to be just to cut up this bacon into cubes of some sort. We'll get at that frying while we prepare the other ingredients. So other ingredients are going to be onions, some Chinese leaf, red pepper, carrot, mushrooms and chili, plus some leftover rice that I've chilled down, and of course the lacto-fermented ramsons pickle. While that bacon is just frying, I'm going to make a sort of a quick barbecue style sauce. So a little bit of jam. This is actually raspberry jam. I would have preferred plum jam, but this will be fine. Bit of dark soy. A little bit of ground ginger. And don't hate me, a little squirt of ketchup. It's just tomatoes, sugar and vinegar. Okay, that bacon's got some nice browning on it now. So that can come out into here. I'm reserving the fat from the bacon in the pan. And then I'll just coat the bacon in that barbecue sauce and let that sit for a moment while I cook the vegetables. So over here, same pan, same bacon fat, onions, peppers, carrots and mushrooms. I'll put the Chinese leaves in a bit later because they cook quicker. Those bits are looking okay now, so in with the Chinese leaves. All right then. The star ingredient, which is my lacto-fermented wild garlic, I'm just going to have a little taste of that, just as it comes. Sour, crisp, spicy, funky, yeah, all good. So that can go on the side there. And those sliced red chilies. Okay, well, that's lunch. Let's give it a little taste. Let's try and get a bit of everything. That's really nice. Wow. So yeah, I'm getting triple chilies here because there's sliced fresh chilies on it, and then there's sliced pickled chilies and chili flakes in the pickle. I'm even going to put a little bit of the pickle juice on there because, well, I suppose functionally it's a little bit like vinegar or lemon juice. It's acidic at this point. So that pickle juice is almost like a seasoning all on its own. That may look like a mess, but that's worked out really well. Thoroughly happy with that pickle. Excitement has found me this morning. This is the bag of American pawpaw seeds that I put in the airing cupboard to germinate. And germinate they appear to have done. See that there? That's a little sprout. So there's no sign of anything else at the moment, but hopefully it won't be far behind. I'm going to take that out now because it'll need some light. And it looks like it could do with a little bit more water. There's a fly trapped in there as well. There must have been some fungus gnats in there. So anyway, I'll open that up, let it have some air, give it a bit more water, put that on a sunny windowsill now, and hopefully we'll get more than one of these germinate, because we do need more than one plant for, if I'm going to try to grow these for fruit, because they're self-incompatible for various reasons, and you need multiple varieties growing near to each other for pollination, plus a load of other factors actually which are quite interesting, but we won't get into right now. If I get more than one seed germinate, we will definitely have more than one variety, because that's how varieties come about, by germinating seeds rather than taking cuttings. So we've got a whole pot full of genetic diversity here, but you just need more than one of them to sprout. Time for a little garden update. So my Cape gooseberry plants are now potted up. I've got 5 of them here. They're doing okay. I've put a little bit of fertiliser pellets in the pots here, just to give them a bit of a boost. They're out here in the downstairs greenhouse now, so this is where they're going to grow to maturity, hopefully. But they're coming along nicely now. They've got a bit more light in this greenhouse. My not blue sunflowers, these are the ones I did in paper pots. This one seems to be the most promising specimen, but they're coming along nicely. Got their true leaves coming in now. And the 3 that hadn't quite germinated, hadn't quite broken the soil, are now coming up okay. So we've had 11 out of 12 of those sunflower seeds germinated, which is not bad. They are, of course, not going to have blue flowers. I keep saying that, but yeah, there are no blue sunflowers. My suspicion remains that these are oilseed sunflowers, simply because that's what the seeds look like. They look like the oilseed sunflower seeds. Anyway, there's a few tomato plants here. These are not the biggest of the tomato plants because those have already gone out in the greenhouse upstairs. We'll have a look at that in a minute. Now, last year I did have a problem with my tomato plants. I put canes in. I put bamboo canes in to support them, and then I tied the plants to the canes. But when they got really quite heavy with fruit, there was a problem. They slipped down, the knot slipped down the cane, and the whole thing collapsed, sort of concertinaed down the cane. So I've got a different plan this year. Let's go and have a look and see what that is. So this year, I'm going to try supporting my tomato plants with these plastic chains. This is strong polypropylene chain. Obviously not, you can support a ton with it, but it will certainly support a tomato plant. So this is secured to a batten that's hung on the greenhouse frame. Probably give it another support there. Since I've got some more bolts, I'll probably put another one in there. Anyway, so these are fixed down. They're just hanging. They're not buried in the soil or anything. They are just hanging loose. But gravity being what it is, we only need to support the vertical thrust of the weight of these plants once they fruit. Now, why is this going to be better than the canes I used last year? Well, what I can do here, grab a bit of string, and when I have to tie the plants in, I can pass that string through the link of the chain and tie it onto the plant, maybe just underneath a branch or something like that. That can't slip down the chain because it's going to be going through that link. So That's my theory. I'm not going to try and thread the plants through the links. That would be silly because they'll get constricted when they get really thick. But I can tie things onto the links of the chains and they can't slip down the chains. So that should hopefully give me a little bit better support for these plants, because I am shooting for really heavy crops here. So these tomato plants have really shot up since I put them in here. I've got one more space there for Marmande. It just needs to catch up downstairs before I plant it out. I'm not sure, maybe I should just plant it in there anyway, but I'm not sure whether it's a good idea to plant a plant that's too small in its final place. I don't see why it should be a problem. Anyway, there's more stuff to see down in the downstairs greenhouse, so let's head back down there. So these sunflowers, the reason I've got them in a bucket is because I'm going to start hardening these off now. At the moment, they're inside this greenhouse and they are protected from kind of the cold nights by the insulation of this greenhouse. I need to start hardening these off so they can go out in the garden. So I've just got them in this bucket, really because that level of the bucket will keep them from being blown around, flapped around by the wind too much. But also it makes it easy for me to pick up and just move out here somewhere during the daytime, and that will just acclimatise these plants to the outside world, to the different humidity conditions mainly and temperatures outside. Tonight I'll bring them back in the greenhouse, and then tomorrow I'll take them out again. I'll do that for a couple of days and eventually they can then stay out. This is my funberry, or Japanese bramble, Rubus elisabrosus, and there's some flower buds on it. I was not expecting this to flower while it's still in the pot. I'm not going to plant this out into its final position yet because we've got some work to do before I can do that. So we're going to see this flower in the pot, I suspect, and maybe even fruit while it's still in the pot, but that'll be nice. And so on these sunflowers, these not blue sunflowers, a few people said you should plant them directly in their final growing position, plant them straight in the soil. Now, the reason I haven't done that is because slugs and snails will tend to eat the young plants where I live. But I've got plenty more seeds, so why don't we plant some of them direct in the soil anyway, and we'll see how those fare. And I think what I'll do is I'll just find a few places, a few vacant spots in the middle of this bean patch, and just plonk some seeds in the little bare patches of soil here and see what happens. So it really is as simple as this. I'm just going to find a little space in between some plants and plonk a seed in there. I'll maybe do two here. They'll be quite close together, but I'm sure they'll be okay. So yeah, just finding vacant spaces in amongst the beans. And if we're lucky, we'll have some sunflowers come up in amongst these plants. This plastic chain, or indeed chain in general, there's a couple of interesting pondering points here. Firstly, how would you manufacture something like this? So this is a plastic chain. It's, I presume, injection moulded. There is a kind of witness mark there from where a two-part mould has been made to press together like this and mould the links. But how would you join the links? Well, I suppose you could try to mould it in place and then have some breakaway material in between the links, but this chain was alternating white and red, and you couldn't do that. You've still got to find a way of joining the white sections to the red sections. I don't think there's any injection moulding process that can change colours rapidly without some sort of purge and mixed materials in between. So anyway, how do they make this? So I was pondering this because with metal chains you can very often see how the links are made from bent wire, and there's a machine, actually there's some fascinating videos of chain being made where a machine extrudes a bit of wire, bends it around the previous link, maybe even welds it shut, and then pops it out, rotates it 90 degrees, extrudes another bit of wire that pops in, and so on. So making chains out of metal, there are lots of different processes for doing that, forging either cold or hot of the metal links. But plastic is not normally forged because it's a material that doesn't have the same kind of properties as metal, so it doesn't go to that kind of red hot stage of metal where it becomes much more malleable without melting completely. Plastic is a lot more difficult like that. But there is a clue, and that clue is right here. I don't know if you can see that. Those link pieces are slightly offset there. So even though there's a seam along here indicating that this piece was moulded in a two-part mould that closed this way, the chain itself, the link, you can see there's an offset there and there's an offset there at the other end. So these two pieces haven't been quite joined together. So I think this chain, each link is made in two pieces and then it's welded together here and here around the previous link. So there's a machine that's continuously welding that. I don't know whether that would be a heat weld or a sonic weld or maybe some kind of solvent. Or it might even be that the weld is done when these things come straight out of the first moulding process and the plastic is still that little bit soft, pliable and sticky, and maybe they're jammed together really quickly that way. So lots of little pondering and speculation points just on these 4 links of chain. This is all I had left over from my chain, and that's another interesting story, because when I was in the DIY store where I bought this, they had a variety of different kinds of mostly metal chain, 1 or 2 types of plastic chain, and cord and steel wire and tubing and so on. That is cut to length and you buy it by the metre. For the chain, they have a policy that you're not meant to operate the chain cutter yourself. You're meant to call a member of staff and ask them for the length of chain you want. They cut it off for you and away you go. There are probably several reasons for that. One is probably health and safety. That machine is a hydraulic operated bolt cutter, and although it's got safety guards and things like that, they probably just don't want the risk of customers operating that piece of machinery and cutting their own fingers off or something like that, or even just having a piece of the chain ping off and go in their eye or something like that. So there's probably a health and safety angle to it. Also, there's probably a theft protection angle to it as well. They don't want you cutting 1.5 meters of chain and then going to the checkout and saying it's 1 meter. Well, they have got steel rules built into the desks at the checkout, so they could measure it and catch you there, but they might not. Maybe also because an incompetent customer might cut the wrong length of chain and think, oh, that's not the length I want. Just leave it there and cut another length, and so there'll be waste in the process as well. So there are various reasons why they don't want you to cut the chain for yourself. Anyway, when I was there a different day, waiting for service for getting some plastic tube cut, there was a chap there ahead of me in queue who wanted 20 lengths, 20 times 1.2 meter lengths of a particular metal chain. And the shop assistant was cutting these 20 1.2 meter lengths for him, which I found interesting because I was standing there mostly patiently waiting, thinking, well, he wants 24 meters. Why don't he just buy 24 meters of chain and cut it at home? Well, of course, he might not have the tools at home to cut that kind of chain he was buying. But there's another reason why, if you want 20 lengths of chain that are 1.2 meters long, there's an advantage to having the store cut them for you. And that's because every time you cut chain, you lose a link. So when I went to buy this plastic chain, I just bought 1 great long length. I figured out what I needed. I knew that I actually wanted 1.2 meter lengths for my tomatoes, and I wanted 6 of them. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just round that up to 8 meters just to be on the safe side. So I cut 8 meters of this chain and took it home and then cut it up into the lengths I wanted. What I forgot to reckon on was the amount that you lose every time you cut a link. And so all of those links that I cut shortened the chain by that much. And that's that much chain that I've bought and not used. Actually, it's probably that much because it's the length of the link minus the thickness of the wire. Anyway, so I made 5 cuts in my chain. Actually 6 cuts because I had to cut this oddment off the end as well. And I lost 6 links of chain, which is obviously that and a bit. And I was surprised at how little chain I actually had left because I reckoned on there being about 30 centimetres left, and in reality there's about 15 centimetres left. So that's an interesting thought, and I hadn't reckoned on that. So if you want lots of lengths of chain, it is to your advantage to get the store to cut them for you because they bear the loss of the links instead of you bearing the loss of links when you get it home. Anyway, that was my ponderings on chain. Here at the littlest watercress farm, we've now got the pump in place. So there's water being pumped in here, overflowing here, back down into this bucket. I've swapped out the bucket, I'll talk about that in a minute. And then down in here, there's a little submersible pump that is powered by a solar panel. Now, of course, this only runs when the sun shines, but that's fine because when the sun's not shining, about half of that time is night time anyway, so that's fine. It can just be dormant at night. And then half of the remaining time, it's probably raining anyway, so this is actually going to get filled up. Rain will fall in here and that will circulate through. And as long as there's a bit of natural light, the pump is circulating water. I think it's actually too sunny for the watercress here. So my plan is I might move it to the other side of the greenhouse where the watercress bed will get a bit of kind of mixed shade. The solar panel can still come across the top of the greenhouse and be on the sun facing side. I really want to do something about that moss up there. Anyway, for the moment it's working. The plants have established nicely. I've got 8 plants in here. Might be 9 actually. So this is the original one that I planted. And the good news is, look at all these little sprouts that have come up. Where I bent it over and pegged it down, it has rooted at this point as well as where it was originally. And it's producing new sprouts from here, here, all over here. So it's bushing out, which is what I want. So far, everything seems to be working according to plan. Now, the reason I changed the bucket, I had a galvanised mop bucket down there originally, and a couple of people mentioned, apparently when they galvanise steel, they often dip it in cadmium first to make the steel rust resistant and to help the adhesion of the zinc to the steel. Cadmium's a really nasty metal. Now, I don't think there's a massive risk of it dissolving in the hard water here, and this water will not be acidic because it's running over chalk all the time. It'll be interesting to see over time how much this chalk gets eroded. And there's a lot of chalk in the soil that's in the system here as well. So the water is almost certainly not acidic, and that isn't likely to dissolve the metals on the metal bucket. But I just thought, well, cadmium's such a nasty chemical, why take the risk? So I've replaced it with a plastic bucket. And again, I chose a mop bucket because then I can have this filter arrangement in here so that any foreign bodies that fall in here and get washed down that tube won't clog the pump. The potatoes I've planted in pots here are all up now. I think I put 3 potatoes in each pot, and I can see sprouts in 3 different places in each pot. So I think we've got all of the potatoes up now. I'll let them grow on a little bit before I think about earthing them up. I might add some more compost just up to the rim of the pot as these plants grow. But yeah, second early potatoes. I can't remember the name of the variety, but those are away now. I was a bit late in planting them, I think. Time for a pickle tasting interlude. Now, I did say we were going to do a separate video for tasting shrimp cottage pickle and Jenny's green tomato chutney. That was intended to be a Christmas video, but we got a bit ill over Christmas and unfortunately couldn't do that. Anyway, so I thought I'd catch up with a pickle tasting now. I'm tasting this along with some beetroot and poppy seed crackers and a cheese called Pickle, which is a Belgian cheese. It's one of these orange rind. I think it might be a washed rind. So we're having this together with some of my shrimp cottage pickle, which is made from vegetables from the garden, mostly, plus elderberries from the woods, and I can't remember what else actually. But anyway, the video is linked in this card and in the description. So this is quite a fine textured pickle, and now I'm going to make a mess of myself biting half this cracker. Now this is interesting. As you can tell, this jar was already open. When I first opened this jar, I just thought, oh, it's a bit of a vinegary and uninteresting pickle. However, like a red wine, it has improved with exposure to air a little bit. I actually believe this may be a pickle that needs to breathe, because what's actually come out of this is something a little bit more complex, and I will try to describe it to you. Elderberries are a strange thing because they very often taste a little bit like wine, and that's the case here. This is a pickle you might put in a cheese sandwich. It's had about half a year to mature now, and I think this is a pickle that needs to mature. And so some chemical or enzymatic process has been going on in this pickle while it's been stored in the jar. And so this is definitely not the same as it was when it was freshly made. And you can see that by virtue of the fact that the elderberry juice is no longer purple. It's kind of this wine red colour now. So in summary, a fruity pickle with a nice balance of sweet and sour. It is sweet and fruity and acidic but not sharp. And it has a complexity that I would compare to maybe a red wine. I think that would go rather well with roast meat or cold cuts. So these blue, not actually blue sunflowers, I'm going to select one of these for special treatment. And I think it's going to be this one here. Not the tallest one, kind of just middle-sized one. Because I want to maximise my chances of getting some flowers off of these variety of different sunflowers. So I've got some there that I'm going to plant out in various places in the garden. I've got some more here which are just coming up now, we'll do something with those. We've got some that I've direct sown in the vegetable plot, but I'm going to grow one in a pot. So I've got a nice big pot here, probably not big enough, but it'll do. And we're going to plant this in a pot so that I can keep it away from all the slugs and snails and whatnot, and hopefully we will get at least one of these sunflowers to flower. So we want this to do well, and so I'm going to use some of this multi-purpose continuous release plant food. I shall mix in a bit of this into the compost as we go. This multi-purpose compost I'm using has got plant food included in it as well, so there should be enough nutrient in here for the growing plant to make it grow nice and strong and healthy. You need a bit more than that, but I'll just put a bit more of this stuff in there, because hopefully this will make it grow nice and tall and strong and blue. Not going to be blue. In case you can hear those birds in the background, those are rooks. We have a rookery in our oak tree, in various trees in the woods, and the young are fledging at the moment, so they've got a lot to talk about. So this we can now just plant out without disturbing the roots, although I am just going to tear open this paper and see. Yes, so there's a root system developing in there. So this paper pot notion has enabled me to handle the thing without destroying the roots and disturbing them too much. But the roots would be able to grow just straight through that paper. I will just put an extra little bit of compost. I'm not going to bury the stem, but I'll just put some extra compost over the top of that paper, really just to put it up a bit. Okay, now nice watering in. And then this is later going to need a cane in there. It's going to need a stake in there to help it grow. But for now, this absurdly large pot. In fact, I'll put this back outside so it continues hardening off, because I'm going to grow this outdoors, obviously. And when it gets bigger, we'll have to tie the cane to something else. We'll have to put a cane in there and we'll have to anchor it so the cane doesn't tip the whole thing over. Anyway, that's going to go back outside now. So the rest of these plants, I'm going to plant them in various spots in the vegetable patch, in the flower borders, in amongst here even perhaps. And so we're going to spread our bets and try and make sure that we've got these sunflowers all over the place, and we will get at least one of them to flowering maturity. I have now replaced the broken glass that was behind the Watercress farm here. It was interesting actually, there was on Facebook Marketplace, somebody was giving away just a greenhouse door. Just literally the glazed door of a greenhouse. They got rid of the rest of the greenhouse and glass and everything, so I came and got the door. I used the glass from it to repair various breaks in here, but also I've got this now spare door frame, which I've just put a piece of mesh on there. The purpose of that is basically a reverse prison for Eva. Eva was getting very, very interested in the smell of the fish blood and bone that I dug into the soil in this greenhouse. Obviously it stinks, and it stinks in just the right way for Eva, and so she was in here getting a bit too interested in the fertilizer, so she can't go in there anymore. And this thing is, because it's a door identical to the real door, I could have actually extended the runner across here. That would have been interesting. Extend the runner so I can have a door that slides in, or the glass door that slides in to close it. I am tempted to get a longer piece of this runner and extend it out here so that this can run on rails as well. But for now, just hooking it onto the rail here like this, and a brick at the bottom to secure it, is plenty good enough. These broad beans made a slightly unpromising start, and they looked a little bit tattered when they came through the winter, but actually they've really, really raced ahead. So lots and lots of flowers there. Can I see any small bean pods? Yep, there's some small bean pods developing down there. So those are the ones we planted in autumn, or late, early winter, midwinter sometime. These are the ones we planted in spring, and these are coming along. No sign of flowers yet, so these will flower after these are finished. So yeah, looking good for a succession of cropping. Jenny's planted the runner beans here now, so we've got runner beans are going to climb up this framework here. and give us a good harvest, hopefully. This middle bed is a bit of a problem, actually. We've got a soil fertility problem here. Everything I planted here hasn't really done very well. The shallots are just looking a bit sad and slow and sickly. The fennel's come up, but it's not really doing very much. I might need to thin that out, but the radishes came up and then half of them got eaten. The second row of radishes hardly showed at all. The lamb's lettuce, that might be lamb's lettuce there. And the soil is just looking a bit packed and just dead. The peas we planted haven't come up at all. That could be that the seeds were too old. That was a packet from a previous year, so it might be that the seeds were too old. But this middle plot just doesn't seem to be doing very well at all. Now, we didn't dig this. We were trying to go for the kind of no-dig thing, but we also didn't have enough compost to really pile on top of this. So that might be the problem. It's a hungry soil. So it might well be that next year we've got to learn from this, get lots of compost on here, pile it up, let the soil feed on the compost. One thing people ask quite a lot in the comments on my cooking challenge videos is, yeah, but what's cooking like normally in your household? There really kind of isn't any normal, but here's an example of something that's perhaps a bit more normal. You probably will recognise this if you've watched any of my other food videos. I've just got some sausages and some vegetables and grains, and I'm going to use some beans as well. And we're just going to throw that together to make a kind of casserole, a little bit like a cassoulet, but it's just going to be a sausage and vegetable and bean stew. First couple of things is going to be the sausages and the onions. So these onions are just going to be coarsely diced. And then over here we're going to get a big pan going, a little bit of olive oil in the bottom. And these sausages can just go straight in. It doesn't matter if the pan's hot or cold, it will get up to speed. Now that I can hear a bit of sizzling in there, the onions can just go in and fry alongside the sausages. Next, a girthy carrot. I don't know what variety these carrots are. They're very vivid orange. And I think I'm going to cut these into, I think we'll have little quarters, actually, so like that. And little chunky pieces, just such as that. That's going to go straight in the pan alongside the onions and sausages. Next, 2/3 of a red pepper. This is going in primarily as a flavouring, so I'm cutting it quite small so the flavour can permeate the whole dish. Next, celery. What's left of a bunch of celery here. And all of this is edible. I will save the little leafy bits I'll put in at the end as a garnish. And this is going to go in kind of coarse chunks. And again, celery into the pan with all the other bits. Now we'll just give things a move around now. You can see we've got some colour starting to happen on those sausages. Dog is outside barking at birds, having the best life. And Florence fennel. So Florence fennel, I really like it. It's a bit like celery. It's related to celery. It's a bit like celery with a slight kind of dill or aniseed flavour. If you don't like aniseed, you probably won't like fennel. But I do. And that also is just going to go in with all the other stuff. Alright, now I'm just going to keep things moving around in here. We can see there's little caramelised edges happening on some of the pieces of vegetables. Make sure the sausages get some contact with the bottom of the pan so they can continue frying. While those vegetables have been sizzling away, I've just went and grabbed some bits of herbs. So I've got some sage, some savoury, marjoram, thyme, rosemary, and a few bay leaves, just from the herb garden. Bay leaves are just going to go in as they are. The rest of these herbs, I'll just get rid of the woody bits. And I'll just run the knife through these a few times, just to chop them up, which will help to release the aromas. Now, of course, nothing wrong with using dried herbs. You could just use a bouquet garni type, herb mix for this, or any herbs you want. These are herbs I happen to like, which is why I've got them growing in my garden. So those herbs will just go in there like that, and we'll just give them a stir round because I want those herbs to get contact with the oils and fats that are coming out of the sausage. Because most of the flavour in these aromatic herbs is oil-based and oil-soluble, and therefore it will infuse into the fats and oils that are naturally present here. A stock cube. I have got homemade stock, but at the moment it's all in the freezer. So I'm just going to use a vegetable stock cube. This contains all of the salt I will want in this dish. So I'm just going to dissolve that in about 300 ml of boiling water. That's less liquid than you'd normally make up a stock cube with, but I've got some other liquid going in. So I've got a tin of chickpeas in water. There's no salt or anything in, or preservatives or anything else in here. It's just chickpeas and water. And I've got a tin of tomatoes. So that stock made up. Chickpeas, including the liquid from the can of chopped tomatoes as well. Now, while that's coming up to a simmer, I've just got a couple more things to prepare. So, lid on now. Now, I had forgotten I've got some mushrooms as well, and that's the beauty of this kind of recipe, is you can just put what you like in there. I could chop these mushrooms up. I'm actually just going to squish them like that, which will get them broken down quicker, because I really want all of the flavour to come out of these. So those can go in the pot. And then I've also got this, Emma, an ancient ancestor of modern wheat. So I'm going to have about just under half a cupful of that. I'll give that a rinse before I put it in, I think. So that Emma grain will go in there. Cooking time for that, I believe, is about 25 to 30 minutes on a simmer. So that's perfect. That will just hydrate in the juices. In fact, while we're here, I'm just going to throw in some red lentils too. About a third of a cupful there. Now, I've never found it necessary to wash lentils. Not the red ones, anyway. Now, where were we? Right, potato. I'm just going to cut these into informal chunks. Yeah, maybe we'll have one more. Right, potatoes in as well then. And that's all in now. And this could go in the oven. I think I will put mine in the oven. Or it could just be simmered away here on the hob. But I think I will put this in the oven, because towards the end of cooking, I'll take the lid off. And yeah, so we're just going to bake that in the oven for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, just to let those grains hydrate, to have all the vegetables go tender. The sausages will cook fully through and the flavours will all just combine. Okay, one last thing I'm going to do before I clear the decks here. Got some fresh parsley. So I'm just going to chop that up. Together with, this is the tops of the celery. Just the little fresh leafy bits that were inside the bunch of celery. And we'll just set that aside, because that's going to go in at the last minute. Okay, that's been going half an hour. Let's have a look at what's going on in here. Okay, most of the liquid has been absorbed. I'm just going to fish out one of those little grains. So that's our Emma wheat there. Just going to see. Yeah, that's cooked. Nice little chewy grains. Okay, now I think that needs a little bit more liquid, because I'm going to put it back in the oven now for 15 minutes with the lid off, just to let these sausages take a little bit of a sizzle on the surface. So I think maybe just a touch more water so it doesn't dry out. Back in the oven now for 15 minutes. Right, 15 minutes of final cooking have elapsed. Oh, I think that looks quite nice. Now I'm just going to move these sausages out of the way for a moment. And then in goes that parsley and celery tops. Just stir that through the rest of the stuff. I might as well have that bay leaf out of there since I could see it. Now, of course, there's quite a lot of similarity here between this and that fish stew I made. And for good reason. This is how I like to cook. Just chuck everything in a big pot and cook it. So this might be nice with a bit of bread on the side. I don't think it needs any, because there's all those grains and beans and potatoes and everything else in there. And there we go. Okay, and we'll just give this a little taste so I can tell you about the textures. That Emma grain, if you like pearl barley and you like wild rice, you'll probably like this. It's got a nice grainy flavour and a very pleasant chewy texture, but not tough. So that was one example of kind of normal-ish cooking here in Shrimp Cottage. I'll probably do another one of these next time I do a random video. Time for a mini watercress farm update. Now you notice the watercress farm is missing. It's not gone. It was just a bit too sunny here in front of the greenhouse, and so I put some shade netting over it, but then it was casting too much shade on the tomatoes inside the greenhouse. So I've moved it around the corner here. And as you can see, my watercress is doing rather well. I think we could cut some of that today and eat it, actually. But this is a really awkward spot. It's better because it's not in full sun all the time, but it's a bit of an awkward spot to get to. So I'm going to move it today, and the plan is to move it to this end of the greenhouse here. So I'll have it to this side of the door here. It will just stick out a tiny bit in front of that water butt. We'll have the watercress here. It'll get morning sun, but then when the sun comes round over the top here, it will be partially shaded by the greenhouse. And of course I can still put the shade netting over the top. The solar panel can stay where it is. Fortunately, this has got a very long cable on it, so it's actually running all the way across to there at the moment anyway, with some slack. So a solar panel can stay there, and I'll just run the cable up over the top, back down the other side to here. So, fortunately, the whole thing's modular, so nothing's fixed together there. The troughs come off, and it can all just be moved. So I'm just going to crack on and do that. Right, so there is the plan. It's there, it fits. I can still get through the door. The mesh door can still slide behind here and for storage, and I can still get to the water butt to fill up watering cans. The cable runs over the top of the greenhouse to the solar panel as before, and it works. There is water pumping. Not very vigorously pumping at the moment because the sun is struggling to get through the clouds. However, anyway, I think we're ready to cut some watercress today. I can see this is actually going to try to go to seed. Some of these bits here, these buds, look a little bit like they might be trying to make flowers. So we're going to cut this, cut some tops off. That will make it bush out. I've just got one more thing to do. You can hear that dribbling straight into the bucket. I've just got to wire that so it drips into the filter. Okay, so that's all in place now. Shade netting back in place. Well, shade and kind of bird protection and stopping foreign bodies dropping in here. Water is trickling away. It will get faster when the day decides to show some sunlight. And the reservoir is now underneath the stand, which is better. And so I can access it here for topping up the water and feeding. So just like a capful of that bin juice liquid feed once a week in there is probably enough. But yeah, as I say, today we're going to pick our first watercress. Right, there we go, first watercress harvest. There are some thicker stalks here which we probably won't eat, but yeah, there's almost as much as you'd get in a small bag of watercress there, and still some more to come. And of course it'll grow back quite quickly, I imagine. Okay, well, I can't resist a little taste. This is the freshest watercress I've ever eaten. Good. Yeah, I mean, it's watercress. Quite peppery. Well, that's a success. We'll keep on going, though. Obviously, that's only the start of the success. Hopefully, we're just going to have watercress throughout the summer now. So, watercress with a salad might seem like a more obvious pairing, but I'm going to use it as a kind of garnish on what we're having for dinner today, which is steamed vegetables, baked potato, and grilled pork chop. Now I've also got lemon juice and butter, and that goes on the vegetables, cauliflower and asparagus. I've got a kind of cheese and yogurt dressing, not sour cream, but same idea. And then this watercress is going to go on there as a kind of garnish for the meat, and we can have quite a lot of it. So there we go. So I'll leave it to your imagination what this tastes like. We've picked this twice now, and where I'm cutting it back, you can see it's bushing out. See, this is just one plant here, and it's really bushed out. So the more I cut it, the more it bushes out, and as long as it's well fed, the more watercress it will produce. We've had 2 small pickings off of this, and I could pick a few more bits there if I wanted to. So it's keeping up with our requirement for watercress even now. I think a little bit later in the year when this really gets going, we're going to have a surplus of watercress, so I'll end up giving some away, and we'll end up making things like watercress soup to use it up. Now you can see a little bit of green algae growing on that piece of chalk there, and actually the gravel is a little bit greenish in places. So there's a film of algae on some things, which means that the nutrient level in here is adequate at the moment. This doesn't need additional feeding. So if we get too much of that algae, I stop feeding. If the algae kind of levels out, I can feed a bit more. And this netting, as I say, is mostly to keep foreign bodies out, mostly leaves from the nearby trees, but also I don't want birds using this as a bird bath. Time for the comment positivity section. And I'm just going to pick out a dozen or so comments that either asked an interesting question, made me smile, or just added to the positivity of the comments section in general. So quite a few questions about the big square pan I've been using lately. What brand is it? Where did I get it? And so on. The brand is Ponderings. I hope I'm saying that right. I'll link to the website in the video description. I'm not sure they make the square one anymore. I picked this up in a charity shop. I only paid £7 for it, and I got a real bargain, clearly. So I paid £7 for something that might have been like 100 or 120 when it was new. It was brand new when I bought it in the charity shop, never been used as far as I can tell. I wonder if somebody bought it and then realised it doesn't work on an induction hob or something like that and donated it. So anyway, yes, Ponderings is the brand. I'll link it in the description. Not sponsored. It's a really good pan, actually. It's quite thick aluminium, and so it does take a while to heat up, but it's a really good pan for stable cooking and even distribution of heat. Why the British flag on everything in your Aldi? Here in America, it's not like that at all. They just think every British person is hardcore nationalist and will be more inclined to buy a product if their country's flag is on it. Well, that's interesting. Quite a lot of people have noticed that and asked about it in the cooking challenge videos. Yeah, a lot of supermarket produce has the prominent placement of the Union Jack or Union flag on it. Pedants will tell you it's not the Union Jack unless it's on a boat, but they're not in charge. So the reason it's there is mainly it's just supermarket shorthand for domestic produce. Why does that matter? Well, I suppose for a lot of people it's about supporting our own farmers and producers and so on, but also about food miles. The reason it's probably like this here and it's not like this in the United States is you think about the size of the country. So here is a graphic of the United Kingdom superimposed over the top of the contiguous United States, and you can see that it's a lot more meaningful to say that the produce comes from this smaller area than it would do from a much larger area. I suppose there is a little bit of patriotism and national pride and so on in it, but I wouldn't call it nationalism. I think nationalists would tend to want a different flag. They would want the flag of England, or at least English nationalists would, and they would want the Cross of St George. And I've only ever seen that on one or two products. Flags on products in general in supermarkets seem to be there sometimes to just identify the country of origin. So I did a little tour around a supermarket and I had a look, and there are flags of other nations on the products. So, for example, a lot of the cheeses had the flag of the country of origin on the packaging. Some of the products in the pasta and pasta sauces aisle had indications of Italian origin. So there are little flags that often indicate, yes, this is just a British product. There's the kind of big banner flags that you get on the produce, which is like British produce, and it's a bit more of a conspicuous marker. And then sometimes you get a kind of stylized Union flag. So like on Hovis bread, on their white bread, they have a stylized Union flag, and on the medium sliced it's red, white and blue. On the other varieties they've changed the colours, but you can still see it's a stylized Union flag. And then there are other cases where the flag appears and it's not indicating that this is British produce, it's just indicating, yay, GB. I did find one example of that, which was peanut butter, and the ingredients of this obviously aren't British because peanuts aren't generally grown here, and palm oil, which is also in that product, is not grown here. So the flag there, I think, is indicating support for Team GB in some sporting event. So yeah, that's why you see the flag on a lot of produce in supermarkets. It's supermarket shorthand generally for domestic produce. On the cooking challenges in general, it feels like you want to just experiment a bit more with food. Ditch the budget and set some other constraints to give a bit more variety with ingredients to experiment with. That is true. The reason I started doing these cooking challenges is not really anything about saving money. It's not really about the price. It was about the fact that the price constrains the choice of ingredients. What it really and truly is I wanted to be on Ready Steady Cook. I wanted to be presented with a handful of unlikely ingredients and have to make meals out of them. So I wanted the challenge of trying to make a coherent dish out of somebody else's, or at least not my own, choice of ingredients. So one way to do that is to get somebody else to choose the ingredients. That's what they do on Ready Steady Cook. But the other way to do it is to set a constraint which limits the choices. So you can't choose exactly what you want. You have to choose within the constraints. So that's what it was all about. And yes, whilst budget was a way of doing that, I think the strict budget limit series is kind of played out, because if I set a strict financial limit for ingredients, it always ends up just being beans, carrots and onions and apples. And we're done with that. So what we need to do now is explore some different ways of creating a kind of surprise in terms of ingredients that I have to deal with and make, or try to make, some kind of coherent dish out of.
So I've got some other ideas as well. There are some little side quests I'm going to do off the side of the cheapish things. There are some side quests with other-ish things, which might be coming up soon. Banana works gorgeous with beef, melted in as you cook the beef, and squished pasta is a good pizza base. Do you know what? When I did that one where I was thinking about, should I put the banana in that beef chili I made, I should have just tried it with at least one spoonful, and then I would know. Now I'm going to have to make that again sometime, just so that I can test whether it really would be nice or horrible to put banana in a savoury, spicy beef dish. I kind of think it'll be okay. I'm getting warm here. Lots and lots of comments, questions, suggestions about the oven clock flickers on camera. So, could you get a little rectangular magnet to cover up the oven clock rather than having to edit something in to hide the flicker? Have you considered using something like light dims on your oven? They're a sort of light diffusing sticker which might be a more elegant solution to the flickering problem and having to edit the black box over every shot. A couple of pieces of electrical tape would save you a lot of editing of the cooker clock, which no one uses. We'll come back to that. Regarding the oven clock, consider putting a bit of painter's tape or a sticky note over it. Why don't you put a bit of gaffer tape over the oven instead of the graphic? Just stick insulating tape over your oven display. For the purpose of filming, is a piece of black tape not easier than the banner? Right. Thank you. I really appreciate that people are trying to solve a problem, but I didn't ask. I'm sorry to break it to you. I'm not trying to solve that problem. I don't want to put a piece of tape over that clock for a couple of reasons. One is I do actually use it as a clock when I'm cooking. That clock has the right time on it. It's not a timer for the oven. The oven is a gas oven. It doesn't have a timer. That is just a clock. And so I don't want to put a piece of tape over it because then I won't be able to tell the time off that oven. We have got another clock in the kitchen, but it is useful for me to be able to just glance down when I'm cooking and have a look at the minutes. So I do use the clock, and I don't want to put a piece of tape over it for that, even for filming, because I do use it when I'm filming as well. But the other thing is, think about it. If I put a piece of tape over the clock, how many people are going to ask me, why is there a bit of tape on your oven? Is it broken? I don't want to have to deal with that. In truth, editing that little text box over the oven display takes about 10 seconds to do. Let's have a little cutaway now and I'll show you how that works. Just a couple of little generally positive things now. Unreasonably cheered up by that wild garlic flower on the chili. And somebody else said same. And then the flower footage at the end of the video, that was the multicoloured flowers at the end of the last random stuff video, just made me smile. I'm glad. It always makes me happy to know that something in the video made you happy, even if it's a really tiny thing. Thank you for saying that it made you smile, because that made me smile. I love your homemade paneer. The next generation of myself, so the next generation now must be a term for offspring, not Star Trek, and myself do the same thing. Only we use Tabasco habanero sauce as the acid. I call it murder cheese because I'm the one in the household it would kill. Everyone else loves it. I do like the idea of that, actually, of using different sour things to make cottage cheese or paneer or acid set ricotta. So rather than just saying, okay, well, I need something neutral and acidic to make the cheese, which is fine, because if you want a neutral cheese, you use a neutral acid, if that makes sense. Neutral tasting acid. You know what I mean. A non-aromatic acid. One that is just acidic, not acid plus onions. But what about if we wanted it to taste of something? What about if we used rhubarb to set the cheese? What about if we used something, like brown sauce to curdle the milk? There's a whole rabbit hole of exploration to be thought about there. I'm not sure I'm going to make a video on it, but I'm certainly going to be thinking about it. Thank you for inserting another idea in my already cluttered brain. Excitement has found me again this morning. This is my capsicum flexuosum seeds, and they've sat there doing nothing for, I don't know, must be 6-7 weeks, doing nothing at all. And the instructions did say they are slow to germinate. All of a sudden, one seedling came up, and then another, and I've just seen there's another one coming up there this morning. So it looks like we're going to have at least a couple of plants of Capsicum flexuosum, which is, to remind you, this is the chilli that may be hardy in the UK. It has little tomato-like fruits. It's a species of chilli, but it's frost resistant down to theoretically -15 Celsius. So I'm quite excited by the fact that we've got some seedlings there, and we will hopefully get some viable plants. I'm not very sure about this one. It's looking a little bit weird, but we'll see. So watch this space for future updates on the possibly hardy chilli. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.